Hi, I'm Aaron Chambers. I'm the lead minister of Journey Christian Church in Greeley, Colorado. I am so honored to be a part of Kentucky Christian University's Preaching Roundtable 2020. If you'd like more information about Kentucky Christian University, you can go to kcu.edu. In this session of our time together, I'd like to talk about what's going on now. What's now? I've been thinking a lot about how to reach lost people, how to reach unchurched people, and preach to them in light of all we're dealing with. And I keep being drawn to 1 Corinthians. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, the Apostle Paul writes this: "For though I am free from all, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more of them. To the Jews I became as a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, though not myself being under the law, that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law I became as one outside the law, not being outside the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside of the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. I do it for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in its blessings." Here's some things I want to point out from that passage. Like the Apostle Paul, we're free. You and I are free. You know, you may be watching this in a different country, but in Christ we are free. And in this country, in America, we are free. And hopefully where you are free as well. And how we use that freedom is so important, because we are free, first of all, to serve. The Apostle Paul points out that he has freedom, but he is free to serve. Are you and I looking for opportunities to serve people? We're going to come back to that in just a little bit. Here's another thing I see from this passage, just a quick takeaway, that our passion to reach the lost must be a priority. Our passion to reach lost people and unchurched must be a priority. And look at all the things in that passage that the Apostle Paul does to win some, to save some. Are you passionate about reaching lost people no matter what? If so, we must be willing to meet lost people where they are. The Apostle Paul was obsessed with reaching lost people. I will do this to win some. I'll do this to save some. Here's the thing. In this time of disorientation and discouragement, when it's really complicated trying to do church and trying to reach lost people, I want to remind you, we do not have the luxury to do what we want to do. All right, because you may have really strong opinions socially, politically, about masks, about not wearing masks, about the election. Here's the thing. As shepherds, we don't have the luxury to do what we want to do. We have to lead the flock. We have to walk with them at their pace. So with that in mind, in our desire to reach the unchurched, let me share some random thoughts on how we can reach lost people effectively in light of the current challenges. Now I'm going to say something. Listen very carefully. Now is not the time to quit, unless it is the time to quit. All right. Now I know if you're like me, we've all thought about quitting during this time. All right. And I want to say now is not the time to quit. But I need to add the caveat, unless it is time to quit. If you're not all in, I want you to decide if you might be being called into something else. It's okay to do something else. If God's calling you to do something else, it's okay to do something else. For what we're going to face, we need men and women who know that they know that they know that they've been called for such a time as this. Why? Because this is an incredible opportunity to reach lost people. I checked with my team, and we've had 47 baptisms during COVID. 47 baptisms. We're seeing people come to Christ on a regular basis. Why? People are scared, and they're looking for hope. I've had several conversations with, I coach cross country at the local high school, and I've had several conversations with my athletes just in the past week about fear, anxiety, faith. Those conversations are happening because people are scared, and they're being under so much pressure, and they're thinking about things. So looking for hope, and I think we have an opportunity to share that hope in a really powerful and profound way. Because of sheltering, here's another thing. Because of sheltering, it's a great opportunity for us, because people who are unchurched, people who are lost, are online more, so it's a little bit easier to get our message in front of them. Remember back in the day when the only way to get your message in front of people was basically to have them come and sit in your church building on Sunday mornings? Well, now people have access to messages 24/7. And it's important we get our message in front of them. Here's another reason why I think it's such a great opportunity. People are craving community. People are craving community. Let me paint a picture for you real quick. I think it's really important to see. I was talking to a director of FCA who works with a local university, and they pointed this out, and I thought it was really profound insight. And it was about college students, and how college students now are doing everything from the room. The room used to be a place where they'd hang out or study, maybe have some fun, rest. But here's the thing. Here's the reality for college students nowadays that are meeting on campus. Their room is their classroom. Their room is often their office. Their room is their social life. Their room is where they go for entertainment. And their room is where they go for church. I mean, just a few things. And young people are craving community. And what happens when you're isolated is very few good things happen when we're isolated, which is why I think we've seen such a lot. We've seen so much social activity that's not helpful on social media. So much like people ripping each other apart and being mean to each other on social media. I think we see so much of that because people are isolated and kind of living in this vacuum and forgetting the importance of face-to-face conversations. And what I'm seeing is this. My point is this. People are craving community. They're craving community, and we as Christians, we as ministers and church leaders and pastors have an opportunity to lead them to community, to create opportunities for them to find community. And here's the thing I want to say to you, really important, to reach lost people in the unchurched, it's going to require us to connect with lost people where they are. Now I want to say something. This may come across as harsh. I don't mean it as harsh. I just want to make an observation. If you say you love lost people, but you essentially never stop meeting in your church building, or you rush back in without thinking about those who are vulnerable in your community, you may not love lost people as much as you say you do. Now listen, I understand some of you live in communities where you really didn't have to stop meeting. You could keep meeting, and that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is those churches that were in communities that were, there was a threat of COVID spreading, where there was a lot of fear, where there were shutdowns and shelterings, but you basically decided to do what you wanted to do and just keep meeting no matter what. What did you say to the community? We decided here as a church, now we didn't do it perfectly at all, any stretch of the imagination, but we decided to move slowly, safely, and mindful of our witness in the community. In our community, we've spent 12 years, at least 12 years, building up a reputation for serving our community. And we did not want to wipe out that good reputation by moving too quickly and moving in a way that communicated that we don't care about people in our community who might be vulnerable, who might be sick. Here's another thing I want to say. If you and I want to connect with people where they are, we must stay online. Okay? I want you to think about staying online. A lot of you may have gone online for the very first time once the pandemic hit. I want to encourage you, stay online. Stay online. You've done all that work. You figured out how to do it. Stay online. It's a great mission field. It's not the only mission field. It's a great mission field. But I want to encourage you, if you've done all the work to get online, to start putting your services online, stay online. Now let me say this. If you're going to stay online, but keep it short. Keep it short. People's attention span is really, really short. Like, for example, our services now are 45 minutes. And we're looking at how we can get the word out in 5 seconds to 1 minute doses. Now listen, we are not watering down the gospel at all. If you have anything important to say about God and His Word, you can say it in 25 minutes, all right? My sermons now are 25 minutes instead of 40 minutes long. All right, and we're doing that because people's attention spans are shortening, all right? And how many more Zoom meetings do people want to be on? Even this right now, like we're mindful of the fact that you only have a short attention span. You're probably zoomed out. You probably are sick of having virtual meetings. So that being said, when it comes to your church and ministry, think about ways you can shorten what you do, add substance, but shorten it. And like I said, we're trying to figure out how we can get the Word of God out in 5 second to 1 minute doses. Why is that? Okay, here, as people are surfing online resources, most people aren't staying there very long. They're looking at it for just a few seconds. Well, what can we give them in those few seconds? What can we give them in a 1 minute reel on Instagram? Right? A one minute TikTok, all right? A 1 minute Facebook Live video. Be creative and think of ways you can, as you stay online, to keep it shorter. And you might want to think about another thing, staffing online or someone to handle your multimedia. I'm able to do this right now because during this pandemic, we hired somebody to help us with our multimedia. A volunteer doing a great job, and so we were able to hire this person to help us. And because we are looking towards the future, we realize we need to have somebody who can help us put out excellent stuff online. Now, when it comes to people watching your stuff online, I want to say something else you may think is harsh, but I just want you to think about it. I don't believe your online attendance numbers, and you shouldn't either. Early on during this pandemic, you remember those churches that were saying, yeah, we're reaching 10,000 people, 50,000 people, 100,000 people. Do you know how you watch stuff online? Like, I have been on Sunday mornings going through some of my friends' church services, and I'll be there for just a few seconds, and they'll say, hey, thank you, Aaron, for watching. And I'm thinking, I didn't watch. I looked for a second. Like, and I looked at the song. I wasn't there. But we're counting people like that. do the best thing you can, find the best way possible to count people accurately. Here's what I'm going to say. Don't be overly encouraged or overly discouraged by your online numbers. I'd encourage you to focus on just being online with a relevant and excellent presence, and then just look for ways to connect those people, all right, in meaningful ways, and then go from there. Here's another thing I want to point out. It's really important to reach unchurched people right now. To connect with lost people where they are, you will most likely upset big givers in your church who are already saved. I think about that passage in Luke 15 where Jesus leaves the 99 in the open field. He goes after the one. Hopefully your church like mine is blessed with people who are really committed to Jesus Christ and faithful believers, and they've been saved for a very, very, very long time. And some of them may be your big givers. Here's the thing. We must not lose our passion for the one over our fear of losing big givers. Because moving forward, here's the thing. We're going to have to take some risk. And some of those risks may upset people in your church who've been there forever, who are already saved and maybe are big givers. And if you are focused on simply making the big givers happy who are already saved, you and I will miss opportunities to reach the unchurched right now. Now, your big givers may say things like, I want my church back. I want things to go back to normal. I'm going to say something that's probably not very popular, but I believe it to be true. Church is not going to go back to normal, whatever that was. All right, it's not. Things have changed. We've reached a crossroads, and it's gone a direction, and I don't think there's any going back. And we just need to keep moving forward. And to do that, we need to do something else. We need to think outside of the box. Your church building may need to be repurposed. Now, let that sit for a second. Your church building may need to be repurposed. If you're ministering at a small church, you may have looked at those big church buildings and thought, I am so glad I don't have to pay overhead on that big church building right now because it's sitting empty. I want to really challenge you as we think about what's happening right now and the opportunities we have right now to reach the unchurched. I want you to think outside of the box, your church building as a box, and think about ways you can repurpose your building to reach people in your community. Because your building, like ours, may be sitting mostly empty during the week. What can we do to repurpose our buildings? Now, what we're doing in our situation is we're looking at our building as a community center from which and through which we can serve our community and create connections with other people. And why are we doing this? Because we want to reach lost people right now. And right now, what's right now? Right now is an incredible opportunity to reach lost people. And God wants us to reach lost people. I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again, because I think it's really important as we think about what's happening right now. A few years ago, I was speaking at a conference out of town, and my wife was in Tennessee with her family and my kids. And at the end of that visit, she went to go to dinner with her parents, and she took our 4 kids to dinner. And my son Silas was there, and at the time, he was 3 years old. And he had a blanket that he loved, and I really shouldn't call it a blanket. It was almost like a ball of yarn, and it was gray, and it was dirty, it was nasty, but he loved it. Every night, since he was little, Silas had gone to bed with that blanket. And every night, he would hold that blanket, that little ball of yarn in his hand, and he would suck his thumb, and he'd rub his nose with that blanket. He loved that blanket so much that he called it his mine, M-I-N-E. Well, so my wife and her parents and my kids went out to dinner in Johnson City, Tennessee, to the House of Ribs, and had a really good dinner and got home that night after dinner. We're putting the kids to bed, and that's when my wife realized that Silas had lost his blanket. He had lost his mine, and they couldn't find it anywhere. They called the restaurant. It was already closed. And that night, my son Silas cried himself to sleep. He was inconsolable because his mine was not in his arms. Well, the next morning, my mother-in-law, who's Johnny on the spot, she got up and started calling the restaurant. Finally, about 11 o'clock, someone answered in the restaurant, and it was the manager from the night before. And my mother-in-law explained, hey, last night we were there for dinner, and my grandson lost his blanket. Did you see it? And the manager said, no, but let me check the garbage cans. And she hung up the phone. Well, about 45 minutes later, the manager called my mother-in-law and said, hey, I've got good news and bad news. And she shared with her the good news. And here was the good news. After the manager had hung up the phone, she went and looked through the trash cans, and they were all empty because they'd been put in the dumpster the night before. And this is a true story. This manager, looking for my son's blanket, went out and saw that all the trash had been put in the dumpster. She climbed into the dumpster and starts going through that dumpster looking for my son's blanket. And while she's in the dumpster, a guy was next door back behind his business taking a smoke break. And he watches and he sees her and he watches what she's doing and he says, "What you doing?" And she said, I'm looking for somebody's blanket. Their grandson lost his blanket in our restaurant last night, and I think it's in the dumpster. And she looked over at the guy, and he was still smoking. And he said, "Oh." And she looked at him like, okay, this is interesting. She keeps digging. And here's what happened. That man who was taking a smoke break looked at her and said, "You know what? My grandson has a blanket. And if he lost his blanket, I want someone to look for it too." So he puts his cigarette out, and the man on a smoke break and the manager of the House of Ribs together went through that dumpster and found my son's blanket. It was at the bottom of a bag of trash with rib fat and coffee grounds and old green beans. Well, that was the good news, that they found my son's blanket at the bottom of that dumpster. And the bad news, she said, the bad news was it was nasty. It was disgusting. My mother-in-law said, "I'll be there in 15 minutes. So I was out of town when this happened, and my wife was telling me this story. And as my wife is telling me this story, I started crying. I got very emotional because it wasn't very far into that story when that story became about Jesus Christ and me. When that story became about Jesus Christ and lost people. And I started thinking about the fact that because of our sin, we were lost. Because of their sin, the unchurched people in this world who don't know Jesus Christ are lost. And what did Jesus do? He dug and dug through that mess of sin, that garbage called sin and the wages of sin. And Jesus Christ dug, and he's looking for his mine. He's looking for his mine. And he digs, and as he's digging, his right hand gets cut and he's bleeding. But he won't stop digging. He keeps digging. His left hand's cut, and he will not stop digging. His feet get cut, get pierced. His side gets pierced. His head is pierced. He is bleeding from everywhere. But Jesus will not stop digging until he finds his mine. You and I are Christ's mine. The unchurched, lost people right now are Christ's mine, and we must do what we can to reach them effectively right now, because I know this to be true. That if lost people and unchurched aren't found by Jesus Christ, he will cry himself to sleep every night and be inconsolable. Because more than anything else, right now, Jesus Christ wants his mine back in his arms. Pastors, ministers, church leaders, that's why we must be so effective right now in seizing the opportunities we have right now to reach the lost and the unchurched.